We Dig Community tells the stories of the people and organizations behind Community Bucket's service-made social mission. We hope you enjoyed this episode and, of course, subscribe to listen to future shows and stay part of the community.
All right, we are live. Welcome, Kelly. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Yeah, we're glad you're here. I know you are newer to the CB team, but we're thankful that we can hop on a quick chat. I know all by a video. So we thank you for giving up your afternoon. Yes, we're doing this recording for those who are listening. It's bright here today in Atlanta. And of course, Denver. Jesse is always streaming in from Denver. So thank you, Kelly. Before we kind of dive in, Kelly has recently joined us. She's coordinating a lot of programming, but ultimately I wanted to have her kind of give us a little bit of background. So Kelly, why don't you maybe share a little bit about yourself and kind of what you were doing prior to joining Community Bucket, and then we'll talk about what you're doing now.
Okay, great. So for the last 3 years, I've been predominantly a stay-at-home mom. I was a public school teacher just before that. And I have worked multiple odd jobs since 2018 when my daughter was born. I just needed more flexibility for my family structure. And so I've been a camp counselor. I've worked as a contract consultant for different nonprofits and museums. My background is predominantly in museum studies, but the main focus of that for about 10 years, I worked as a museum educator and then later a museum director. And my focus was based around historical agricultural realms. So teaching people where food came from, what is our food history? What are the recipes that we consider that are inherently Southern to us? Where did those actually come from? The real truth behind our food and why we need to keep a connection to it even today in 2021, because I think a lot of people take for granted the hard work that goes into getting food into our homes. And I think there's a lot of people, at least in the Atlanta area, that don't understand how insecure neighborhoods can be with having fresh access to fresh fruits and vegetables. Many times the main things they have are very shelf stable: rice, beans, pasta, which don't offer a complete nutrient balance. So I have just been super excited to come on board and meet everybody, get to know some of the farmers that we're going to be working with this summer, and really getting jazzed up about trying to spread a little bit of an educational message with all of our volunteers that are going to be joining us at our summer programs.
Yeah, that's really exciting. It sounds, we're glad to have all that kind of like inspiration behind you and like fueling this programming kind of moving forward. Can you remind me, how did you come across Community Bucket? Because you hadn't heard, you obviously have a passion and we're aligning. Can you kind of tell us how that came about?
Well, I was given the opportunity to go back to work, at least part-time. My daughter started school. Her school had been remote until April because of the pandemic. And once they were resuming in-person classes, face-to-face learning, I said, well, this is my chance to, get some work back into my life. I wanted to put some good back into my community and do some professional development. So I was looking for part-time jobs. I didn't want anything super long-term because I wasn't really sure where I wanted my career to go. And I still need some flexibility. But this was one of the first jobs that popped up on the Facebook jobs that I was looking for in the job section. It was maybe the second or third that I was scrolling and looking at. And I said, this is amazing. This is a lot of the stuff that I used to do. And it's a whole new realm. It lets me be outside. It lets me meet new people. It lets me be around plants. So I thought it would be perfect. And I wrote my cover letter within the hour and updated my resume quickly and had it sent off immediately.
That's hilarious. I love it. I'm glad that we piqued the interest. It sounds like we're pretty aligning. We're pretty much aligning. And so tell me this, tell us about your current role. What are you doing for Community Bucket? Talk about kind of what you're going to be doing day to day, and then maybe a little high level, kind of whatever you want to share.
Well, Community Bucket was fortunate enough to get a grant from the Food Well Alliance to fund a new initiative. And that's what I'm essentially getting started it was supposed to start last year. And with everything that went on, it had to be tabled. So there's been a lot of change. But the big push of it is to develop a relationship with some urban farmers. They're all in the metro Atlanta area. We're working with 4 of them this summer. And over the course of the summer, hosting 12 different volunteer programs where attendees can come, get to know a farmer, come back hopefully and see them again later on in this season. Or if they can't attend that one, they just want to meet a different farmer, they could get 3 or 4 different viewpoints if they attend 3 or 4 different farms. They can see the diversity in the background of the farmers. They can see the diversity in the community that these urban farms serve. And they can put some good back into their own community or another community that they maybe have never visited before. So my official title is the Summer Program Manager. So what I've been doing lately for the last month or so is meeting with the farmers and trying to get an idea about what their workload needs are, because agriculture is really tricky sometimes. You're at the mercy of bugs. You're at the mercy of hot weather, not enough rain. And even with irrigation, it may not be, you may have a crop that just isn't destined to thrive. And so they're constantly having to put sometimes more effort than they have the manpower for into certain areas. And what we're hoping to do is to say, let us take some of the workload off of these minor tasks so you can focus on the big things. And then there's a couple of other places that just because of lack of manpower in the last few years, there's some bigger infrastructure projects that have led to some safety improvements needing to be done to help increase accessibility for guests, whether that be people who might have mobility challenges or families with strollers. They can't always visit these farms. And if they can't visit them, then they can't get engaged with them. So we're trying to divide our manpower, get as many volunteers as we can at each event so we can make sure that we get their maintenance tasks done, whether it be thinning out crops or weeding things, moving mulch, planting things, harvesting things. And then if we've got enough hands on deck to be able to get some of those bigger projects done, because everyone I've spoken to says we could do X, Y, and Z, but we just don't have more than 2 or 3 people at a time. So that's what Community Bucket can offer, is the manpower.
That's great, Kelly. As you know, we are so thankful for the grant from Foodwell Alliance. And this has, as you mentioned, we first conceived of this program back in 2019, thinking fully well, okay, this is going to be a 2020 initiative. But with the way everything goes, better late than never. But I do think, as you're seeing, there's a lot of needs right now, even more so in many ways. So it's really great timing just to get people outside and getting back to it. Can you share just a little bit? By the time this goes live, we may be right around our first day, but help everybody just understand what the program will look like, how people can get involved if they want to show up and volunteer or support in any other way.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, I'm working on planning out 2 different sort of schedules that would hopefully align with volunteers' abilities to come and help with and attend. So we're going to have some on Thursday evenings. So those that want to come right after work and maybe have obligations on the weekends that would prevent them from volunteering on a weekend day, we've got Thursday nights available every other Thursday. And then opposite of that, we've got Saturday mornings available. And the Saturday mornings are a little bit longer because you'll probably have a fresh night of sleep right behind you. So we might do a little bit more of the heavier work on those Saturdays. And it'll also be cooler, like temperature wise. I mean, all the programs are going to be cool, but the temperature wise, we'll have some bigger projects on those Saturdays. And the hope is that we'll get everybody together, get each other to introduce each other. I've got some great icebreakers that I'm pulling together that are very relevant to the work that we're doing and relevant to those of us that might be new to Atlanta or outside of Atlanta. Get to know each other, put in some awesome work, and then have a little get together towards the end, or even a small at the beginning and the end, where we can communally create something that you can then take away. So one of our farmers is willing to donate some very small herb plants. And so one of the ideas is that we would have everybody be able to take home a small windowsill herb garden that then they can watch grow in their own apartment. You don't need a huge amount of space to have a small windowsill herb garden. You can just have a sunny window in an apartment. But he wants to give away some extra plants and as a show of thank you. And so we'll be able to pot those and have everyone take them and nurture them over the course of the season. Also trying to get involved in a little bit of some arts. A lot of people don't realize how plants are in every element of our life. And so having some, there's been some ideas tossed around where we might do a natural dye with a white cotton face mask. It's very relevant. We're still masking up pretty much in a lot of places. But it's a very quick process that we could have people do a really quick tie-dye process at the beginning of the event, and then they'll be able to take that home at the end. So it's like a little, sort of like a souvenir, but it helps them remember the work that they put in at that farm.
That's great. If anything, we're going to need more than just the summer, as we've talked about, to get.
Yes.
Yeah, we're excited. Kelly, so obviously you bring a ton of passion around the just food and farming space in general. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe even, I don't know how far back that goes, where that came from, but just the origins of that passion?
Yeah, I actually grew up on the edge of my family's, what was a 100-acre farm in Paulding County. And when I was growing up, we still raised corn in a big field. And all of my uncles who live around the same property and my parents, we all had our own, what were known as like kitchen gardens. You grow for your own family. And we would share extras. We have apple trees, and I would go foraging in the woods for things like muscadines and blackberries as a child. My grandfather was big into nature and constantly took me on nature walks. And he said, your feet are always touching the ground and you are connected to the earth, and make sure that what you put into the earth and what you take out of the earth, is always good. So I feel like I was raised in that kind of environment. We did not waste food growing up. We were never forced to eat a vegetable we did not like, my sister and I. But if we had something on our plate, we had to eat it. And so I would say that was a very healthy way to teach us that food is special, and that you're never guaranteed to know where your food is coming from. I think, if anything, we've learned that the pandemic showed us that the pipeline for our food resources that comes from everywhere. I mean, Georgia's number one industry is agriculture, but a lot of our crops come from the Midwest, or even internationally. A lot of them come from Mexico. So if we have a major event that shuts down that pipeline of sorts to get food to us, then everyone's going to suffer. And it's really hard to try to pull together. And there's just a lot of waste in our modern environment, culture as well. I see a lot of people throwing stuff out that could be composted. And that's a big passion of mine, is I'm always trying to help teach people how you can compost on a small level, and then what to do with the compost when you're done with it.
Yeah, there's so many levels at which you can have an impact in this type of work. And as we've seen over the years of working with community gardens and some other farms, it really not only helps build that connection as with everything that you're describing, but also connecting people to the city and different neighborhoods, getting people out of where they live to other areas of the city, and just seeing really new vibrancy coming up in all these neighborhoods has been great. What I did want to ask, Kelly, are you, prior to joining Community Bucket, did you do volunteering of this sort with other organizations, or curious how else you get involved in Atlanta, or were involved before diving into this role?
Yeah. So I was working in the tourism and hospitality industry last year before COVID hit. And two of my jobs, I had two part-time jobs that I bounced around because of the flexibility of them. And they both essentially shut down because of the pandemic, because tourism and hospitality was one of the first things to basically cease operations. So I have a background in textile design, theater costuming, historical costuming, et cetera. I was working in the Atlanta theater circuit for a little while, and then also as a historical costumer at one of my previous positions. And so with that, I am in a lot of local groups for seamstresses, sewists, et cetera. And three different women in the Atlanta area had the same idea at the same time. They said, what if we start an initiative where we can all just volunteer, share resources, and make masks for hospitals and nursing homes, and et cetera, et cetera. Because even in the beginning of COVID, I think we were taking a lot of information from knowing source control and how diseases can be spread less, like you can lower the severity of the spread if you can control it at the source. And so while wearing just a 2-layer cotton mask may not necessarily help something going in, it definitely helps catch things coming out. And so the more people that, especially when you're asymptomatic, as we were learning early on in the COVID days, we were trying to do everything possible. And so getting as many cotton cloth masks into the hands of patients in hospital settings, so the professional PPE could be saved for the healthcare workers, was our main goal. And over the course of about May to August of 2020, we made over 60,000 masks and distributed them 100% by volunteer labor.
Dang, that's insane. I'm just like so inspired. I feel like we could talk a whole lot about that, like just specifically, like sounds like you guys were doing amazing things and it's inspiring. And of course, I mean, it sounds like community is pretty important to you. Giving back is pretty important to you. These things you've done before. Why is that, right? Like, can I ask, like, why is it so important to you, and how has it kind of like shaped your life thus far?
So I, in the last few years, had a realization that I am fortunate to have the time where I do not have a full-time career that I have to devote 40 plus hours of my life to. My daughter takes up a lot of my time, but now that she is able to play more independently and she's going to school in person, it freed me up to have a little bit more time. And then also my spouse is a teacher, and I was able to have summers to focus on things that were important to me. So last summer, I was able to put everything, 20 something hours a week into my volunteer mask group. And I was helping to run some of their social media and helping to coordinate volunteers on larger projects. We had, I don't even know how many hundreds or even thousands of bed sheets and duvet covers that were donated by a very gracious company. But they shipped them in on large pallets. We're talking giant boxes of pallets. And we had to sort them, organize them, distribute them to all of our sewists, move them from one warehouse to another because the one storage facility who donated space couldn't donate it any longer. And so I had to gear up and put together a league of people who would be willing to move this stuff while we're still in the middle of a pandemic. And we had to do it all very COVID safe. I feel like if I have the time to give back to my community, I should be. I have the passion of wanting to do more for others who don't have the time or the money to do it. And in addition to Community Bucket, I'm now volunteering somewhere else. So I, instead of the mask group, because we kind of worked our way out of a job, and I said, well, I have my part-time work with Community Bucket, but I feel like my passion is still education. It always has been. And so I've been volunteering at a local school 4 hours a week as well for the last couple of weeks, which has really been great.
That's awesome. Well, we are thrilled to have you on the team, Kelly. And I know this summer is a big return for us from a pretty long hiatus of not really gathering in person. And so we'll link to the how to register for all the FeedATL events and all of those dates coming up. So keep an eye out for those. Anybody who's listening to this who's interested and wants to find out what those icebreakers are that Kelly has in store for us. So I'm sure they're going to be great. One last question that we like to ask of all of our guests, Kelly, is so the name of the podcast is We Dig Community. As goes without saying that JC and I and the team at Community Bucket, it's something that we're really passionate about, is helping cultivate community and giving people access to that. But besides that, we always love to ask, what is it that you dig? Anything that you haven't shared already, but just you, Kelly, in your own life, what do you dig?
As in, what are my interests and hobbies and such?
You take it any way you want.
All right. Well, since 2013, I have been a member of the Atlanta Freedom Band. It's an all-adult LGBTQ marching band, and we perform all over the Atlanta area and all over the Southeast. We've gone to Augusta and to different conferences all over the US. But I've been on their color guarded dance team since 2013. I had to take a little hiatus because they also stopped performing in 2020. And now I'm just a little too busy to perform with them this year, but I'm going to be volunteering at a couple of their events if time permits. but that's my community. Like, they are some of my best friends. We've gone back almost 10 years, and they're like my second family.
Love it. Well, we will definitely have to check back in with you as FeedATL program gets underway, maybe later in the season, and hear how everything's going. But just wanted to thank you again for taking the time and joining us. And as I said, we're excited to have you on the team and looking forward to all of our volunteers getting to know you and seeing you on site in the coming months. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.